boardroom. This is the business of esports. The worlds of gaming and esports are evolving every day faster than ever before. With yougov's living data, you can probe into the real thoughts and behaviors of esports fans and gamers worldwide. If you're a team, a brand, an agency, or a rights holder, you should be talking with yougov. They're partners with the biggest names in esports and the biggest brands all around the world, driving compelling results every single day. Check out yougov.com/BOE and schedule a call with yougov today. From the keyboard to the boardroom, this is the Business of Esports weekly news show / post podcast live stream. I am Paul the Prophet Dawalibi. I'm joined today by my friends and co-hosts, the Honorable Judge Jimmy Baratta, Lindsay the Boss Poss, and Jeff the Juice Cohen was here 2 seconds ago. For those of you who are new here, welcome. What we do is we cover the most pressing gaming and esports topics and news of the week. We look at all of it through a business and C-suite lens. We dissect, we analyze the business implications of everything happening in this industry. But best of all, we get to do it live with you guys. You get to ask questions, get in our faces, challenge us. We encourage it. We welcome it. It's a safe space. We know so many of you lurk, listen to this after the fact. It's not a problem, but please feel free to get involved. It makes it so much more fun for everybody. How is everyone doing today? Lindsay, how you doing?
Good. It's been such a crazy week. I'm in the countdown to surgery, which is now in less than 2 weeks. So I'll be on next week, and then after that, we will see what happens.
Boy, well, I mean, I'm sure you're gonna have like Adam, who will miss you. Although doesn't seem to be missing Jeff. Says bye, Jeff. Adam. Great to have you here, Adam. Jeff, welcome back.
I'm back.
How is everyone else doing? Jeff, Jimmy, you guys doing good?
I always assume that's directed more to Jeff than to me. I'm doing great, guys.
My computer is super laggy, so hopefully that's not a problem, but I'm doing good.
And I'm guessing no one here played the new Call of Duty, right? I asked Jimmy on the podcast. By the way, on the podcast this week, Sean Pate from Zenny, the eyeglass manufacturer, online-only eyeglass, retailer. They have Zenny Gaming now, which is a whole line of gaming, like blue light blocking gaming glasses called Blocks. And we had them on the podcast this week, Sean Pate, who's their head of marketing and communications, basically. And very interesting to see what a non-endemic brand, even though they now would consider themselves an endemic brand, seeing as they sell a gaming product. But very interesting to see how they look at the gaming space, because they've sponsored like everything from teams to influencers to leagues to all kinds of things. So very interesting conversation. I highly recommend everyone tune into that. But I was disappointed that I couldn't have a Call of Duty conversation with Jimmy, that we couldn't get into it about Call of Duty.
If you want to install Paul and set our next meeting in a lobby, I can definitely oblige. The last time I tried doing that for a work meeting, me and the other party both played Valorant, because we were really into Valorant at the time, and it actually inhibited a meaningful dialogue, because he'd be like, "So, anyways, I was thinking for this marketing release," and I was like, "Yeah, shut up, I'm pushing."
Jimmy, you should link in the chat our TikTok, because there may be some TikTok live gaming conversation. We're gonna go deep on TikTok, and you may get live streams on TikTok that don't appear anywhere else. So make sure to follow us there if you're not already. Jimmy will link it. It's at Metaverse TV, spelled exactly how you would think, at Metaverse TV on TikTok. Adam says, I played enough for all 4 of you. Adam, I'm curious, are you on the side of this is the greatest COD ever and it's selling like crazy, or are you on the side of SBMM in pub lobbies sucks, and we should all boycott it. Chris says 800 million sold. Steamers were right. SBMM really killed that game. Chris, I mean, I've heard this take, and I don't think it's a fair take. Just because they sold a lot of copies and a lot in pre-sale, and to be clear, at a higher price point. So the number of copies is misleading. Like the 800 million number is misleading because the base price was $70, not $60. And some of the deluxe versions, I think, went up to 100, 120 bucks or something like this. So I'm not convinced that this is a good take, right? SBMM may still kill the game. It just means that they did sell a lot of it ahead of time and in an environment where there's really nothing else, right? Like literally nothing else to play. Chris says, stop listening to the community. Streamers' voice is clearly overstated. I mean, I don't consider myself a streamer, and I think SBMM in pub lobbies should not be a thing. But I've said enough.
That's a bold take. Stop listening to feedback. I do think, generally in the gaming community, you do see some of the loudest voices get amplified, even if it's not the will of the majority. So I think Chris has a point there. But generally, it is good to listen to feedback from your customers.
Well, to be clear, for the super casual gamer, SBMM's great because you're never in a lobby where people beat up on you unfairly, right? Like you're always with other shitty players, basically. I mean, this is the advantage of SBMM for casuals. I don't think you can make a game that appeals to casuals like COD forever and hope for long-term success. I think part of COD's success has been that hardcore COD-loving community. And if you alienate them, at some point, I think that model falls apart. Maybe not on this game, maybe not on the next game, but eventually I think that model falls apart when you lose the base.
What's the argument against it? Like that you just want, like the whales just want to be able to crush people sometimes?
The argument against it is, I mean, it's for the streamer specifically, it's that the content is not always good because you're always in sweaty lobbies, right? But for better players, it's a similar argument. You can't just log in and get a pub game that's not sweaty, right? Like you have to try hard in every game because SBMM's in every lobby. The easy solution is you put SBMM in the competitive lobbies and you leave the pub lobbies as is. I don't know why every game just doesn't do that and make everyone happy. But I don't work at Activision Blizzard. Lots of thoughts on this. So let me just read the comments here. Adam says hybrid. SBMM should be strictly for ranked IMO, but overall I really enjoy the game. Adam, totally agree with you. Put it in ranked, makes total sense there. You want to sweat, you want to try hard. That's the place to do it. Christian says, hello everyone, blessed start to the week with what is going to be the biggest CSGO major in history. Christian, I'm sorry to break it to you, we're not even going to talk about it unless you want to. Just because it hasn't really made news. I don't know. Adam says, SBMM won't kill sales, but could kill retention, I think, more. Agreed. That I agree with. Christian says, I'm not surprised with how successful Modern Warfare 2 has been. Again, I think the sales numbers, that 800 million number that everyone's bandying about, is misleading. It is misleading because they raised the price and they pushed way more pre-orders. I don't know. So it is fastest selling, whatever they wanted to claim. Jimmy corrected me on the podcast. It's the fastest selling, not the best selling. Chris says, how many esports stars were in the commercial? Okay.
Only one that mattered, and it was Lando Norris.
They want to go after casuals, so be it. I just think that road is paved with all kinds of landmines and problems and issues, and can you guys find me a good example of a time where a company with a product that had a hardcore base of customers completely turned on that base of customers and it was a success long term? Like I don't know. I just don't think it's a good strategy in general, but We'll see. We'll see what the retention's like. Can we stay on the sort of the Microsoft, Activision, Blizzard topic in general? Because Phil Spencer was like all over the news this week. I don't know if you guys saw, but like literally all over the news. You guys answered. Chris says Fortnite. I mean, I would argue Fortnite did the exact opposite, right? They catered in some ways to the more hardcore base who wanted a pure shooter. I see what you guys are saying, though. The no build was maybe not for the sweat, but no build has become just as sweaty. So I don't know. I don't like. Not sure.
A lot of talk about sweat on this podcast so far.
Well, yeah, but it's not. I mean, I don't know what else. What other term do you use? Okay, guys, let's talk about Phil Spencer. I'm gonna give you a few stories here, because they were all, there's like maybe 100 stories all covering what Phil Spencer said, you know, as if it was Moses coming down from the mountain. And so here's just some of it. So here's the first one. Phil Spencer admits Xbox won't be able to avoid price hikes forever. Okay, hold on to that thought. This one said, Xbox Game Pass growth is slowing down on console, claims Phil Spencer. And the third one says, Phil Spencer acknowledges it's been too long since Xbox's last big first-party game. So we have 3 quotes here from Phil Spencer. I don't know if you guys want to dive into one specifically or talk in general. I can give you a bit more. If you guys want a bit more details on each one, happy to jump into it. But general thoughts on these 3 claims from Phil. Too long since their last big first-party game. They can't avoid price hikes on Game Pass forever, or Xbox. And Xbox Game Pass growth is slowing down on console. By the way, numbers came out here: 25 million subscribers for Game Pass, and 10 to 15% of Xbox's total revenue.
I actually think the most important part of this is actually probably one of the quotes you didn't pull, but just kind of glossed over there right at the end, was how you mentioned that Xbox Game Pass is currently profitable, which now there's a lot of ways to massage numbers to make anything seem profitable, depending on what you include as a cost and how you allocate things. But I do think if we take interest at face value, that's actually a very important quote for the future of the industry, because I think a lot of people have at least worried and concerned or skeptical maybe that the Game Pass model could actually be profitable for Microsoft. So I think it's pretty important to come out and say that. Some of the other things I think are maybe a bit more obvious, like saying they're gonna have to potentially raise the price of Xbox. I think that makes sense with what we're seeing with inflation, supply chain, just general costs. Like that maybe isn't surprising. And then him saying it's been a while since they've launched a game. Well, yeah, we all kind of know that. So maybe those are less interesting. But yeah, that's my thought.
Jimmy, go ahead.
I was just going to say, Paul, you actually missed my favorite and fourth story out of Phil Spencer this week, which was that Xbox is losing as much as $200 on every console they sell, and they're doing it as a way to hopefully supplement and get more Game Pass users and hardware sales out of it. I linked it for you here if you wanted to bring it up in our private chat. All of these self kind of deprivating comments and undermining Microsoft's position, maybe as part of the legal battle going on right now with the acquisition of Activision Blizzard, and just saying, hey, we have a lot that's not going for us, and this is something that's really going to help us, and we're not a monopoly. So I don't know if it's legal posturing. It's definitely honest, right? We're looking at a lot of numbers that they're selling, and there's facts behind this. I do think it's posturing for the legal battle with Sony and trying to and Lindsay's shaking her head yes, so I don't want to, if you want to jump in, please. But that's my take on it, and I just wanted to share that fourth story, which Paul's pulling up right now for you guys that are watching instead of listening. Xbox loses as much as $200 on every Xbox it sells, Phil Spencer says, and this is November 2nd. All right, so this is we're live right now, so that's today.
You have thoughts on this?
Yeah, I 100% thought this was sandbagging when I was reading all of these at once. Obviously, there's some truth to these statements, of course, but there was a book published in the 1950s called How to Lie with Statistics. I think you could just as easily spin the subscriber count and all this stuff to be a positive news story if you wanted to. There is a lot of truth to price hikes and all of that. Trends in tech indicate that the growth at all costs and getting users onto platform has been a huge discount to users for years and years. And this is across platforms, right? Uber heavily discounted its rides for years. Famously, they never cared about profitability. They wanted people on the platform. They wanted those numbers. They wanted people to use it. And it's finally started to slow down that Uber is charging the actual cost for rides. So I think that this is a trend like across the tech industry, that there's no more of this growth at all costs kind of building, which does point to more sustainable growth and actual price determination for products like this. So it's not like terrible. It's just that consumers no longer get the discount that they're used to. But when it comes to, sorry, that was also a very economics answer, so I hope everyone enjoyed that. But when it comes to like, Game Pass isn't doing that great and all that, I totally think it's sandbagging. I would imagine that they're not smashing it out of the park in the way that they would like to, maybe, but I bet that you could easily take these numbers and put a different spin on them. That's, hey, we're the first of its kind, and growth was explosive for 3 quarters and now has kind of plateaued, but we're still growing and it's going well. And they just chose not to do that because of the legal battle. So those are my thoughts.
Lindsay, the sandbagging word to me is exactly what this is. And it's not even that they're doing this because of the legal battle, right? Like, since when have we seen this kind of transparency from Microsoft ever, right? Never. Like 65 different stories with like 8 different quotes in each one. And like, it's just,
the sheer amount is so suspicious. It's like they could have just talked about one
it's
thing.
clearly a PR campaign.
Yeah.
Like this wasn't some random quote. Like Phil Spencer doesn't just like go out and do interviews without like having a strategy behind it.
But it's clear sandbagging, right? And it's all mostly negative news, which is like not your typical PR strategy. Like, you wouldn't do this blitz campaign of, by the way, guys, we may raise prices. By the way, guys, we're kind of losing money. By the way, guys, this is only 10% and the growth is slowing. Right? Like, who puts out this amount of bad news unless you have some ulterior motive, which is they're desperately trying to get through the acquisition, of Activision Blizzard here. And the worst picture they paint of Microsoft, position in the market, the better for them, right? If they come out and they say, look, Game Pass is 1,000 times the size of Stadia, and that was the headline, right? That doesn't help them, but that's true. It's 1,000 times the size, right? But that headline would not help their case. But saying we're losing money and growth is slowing and it's, woe is me, it's so suspicious, disingenuous. Like, I don't know. I find everything they're doing right now icky, considering that on the business side, they're making the right moves, right? Like, they should be celebrating this. And yeah, we know Xbox loses money on consoles. Like, this is, or everyone who makes a console, it's a loss leader. This is not news. If anything, I'll go one step further and I'll say, Jimmy, this article is sandbagging, not for the legal battle, not for the acquisition. This is sandbagging for the price hike to the customer, right? This is like, hey guys, we're raising prices because we're losing so much money. You don't want us to lose this much money, right? We have to raise the prices. I don't know. It's just, I find all of this real icky, real cringy. They hired a PR firm that's just gone to town with bad news, but it feels like PR by their legal department. You don't
totally agree. Totally agree with all this. The other question then is, what's the point? Like, they're gonna just raise the prices anyways. We kind of don't have a choice. Is it to soften the blow so that we don't go to PlayStation and Nintendo? Right? Is that it? Because I would just look at the price and be like, well, that's not going to stop me from getting the product, the software, the hardware, whatever it is that I need to get from them, right? There are only so many console manufacturers out there that compete at this level. And if you're loyal to Xbox, very fat chance that this is going to cause you to leave for Sony, right? So I'm also like, what's the point behind all of this, if not the legal posturing for me, or to your point, the sympathy, I guess. It's just, I don't know. They're probably paying too much to that PR firm is kind of the conclusion here.
Christian says, it's funny. I saw a TikTok of him giving one piece of career advice, and it was take a risk even if you have no idea what you're getting into. Kind of find it ironic with these stories about Xbox. I mean, that's just such generic advice. Like, that's
It's also
TikTok
pretty terrible
advice.
advice.
yeah. I don't
Take
know
a
if I agree with
risk, even if you have no idea what you're getting into. Okay. Like,
Again, he's really into overselling these things. Yeah, no idea.
Take it
seems a
literally.
little
Like, that's a
far.
terrible piece of advice.
Chris says, bet Game Pass is doing better than PS Plus. I would bet also. I mean, I would bet, I'll go so far as to say I think it's probably an order of magnitude better. Like if Game Pass has 25 million, I think it's probably 10 times what PS Plus is doing. I don't know. I haven't seen any numbers. Christian says 21st century marketing tactic. Everyone is a Debbie Downer, so be the video game Debbie Downer. But he's the wrong guy to be the Debbie Downer. He's an insider. He's like, there's not. You don't want to be a Debbie Downer on your own company. Christopher says, point maybe just to eliminate the Series S. That's a good one too. I mean, there was a story, I think, last week about developers pushing back, wanting the Series S gone because it was hampering basically their ability to make good games because they have to develop for the weaker hardware also. Maybe he's trying to soften that blow. Chris, it's a good thought. All right, let's. I think we gave Phil enough airtime. Phil and the PR and legal team at Microsoft enough airtime. So let's let's talk about the X Games. This caught my eye as someone who has never really watched the X Games ever. But the headline here was the X Games has a new owner with plans for YouTube, esports, and Twitch. Esports, YouTube, and Twitch. Next year's X Games could air on Twitch and YouTube alongside its showing on linear TV. And they're thinking of bringing esports to it. So it's not just how to watch, but what they will broadcast on it. So they're thinking about bringing esports. But I'm curious what you guys think about this fit. Do you think putting esports, competitive gaming with X Games makes sense, first of all? And second of all, what do you think about broadcasting it on more traditionally gaming platforms like Twitch or YouTube?
I don't know that you can, make like Tony Hawk Pro Skater competitive per se, but I think it's a great idea to at least have this crossover. There's enough video games around kind of the X Games type scene, like whether it's dirt bike racing or skateboarding, snowboarding, stuff like that, which at least that's what I believe the X Games is, that it makes sense to have that crossover. And I imagine there's a decent crossover between audiences of people that are gamers and people that like the X Games. Again, this would be a great time to have like some YouGov data, because I'm just saying that anecdote, like that's just my guess, but obviously it would be great to be armed with that data. But I think there's a good audience crossover. So I think it makes a lot of sense. It'll be interesting to see, what they do with it. The other thing that's funny, I just find this article written funny, the way they have the headline where they're like, they're bringing in esports and they're going to put it on Twitch and YouTube, as if those are like congruous things, when, like, as you noted, Paul, they're completely different. Like, two are ways that you watch it, and the third is like a completely different engagement and like actual event. So it kind of concerns me that that's the way they're framing it in their PR, because that leads me to believe that they're going to screw this whole activation up.
Look, I don't know anything about X Games, but I had the impression that it's the polar opposite of esports, right? Like, I thought this was people like, I don't know. I don't even know I can't name one sport in the X Games. Like, I don't know. Biking down mountains or something. I don't know. Like, isn't that what they do?
It's
Lindsay,
like,
help me out here.
It's a lot of like trick-based stuff though. So it is BMX biking and skateboarding and stuff, but it's like half pipes and the cool like mountain courses and trick competitions and like all it encompasses a lot of stuff. And honestly, I think that like the very kind of counterculture-y part to it fits in well with a lot of the gaming audience. So I do think that there's a lot of kind of the same, like a big overlap, I would say, in the audiences between like people who are on Twitch and people who would be interested in X Games. So I think it's absolutely a no-brainer to start broadcasting that on Twitch. What I am less sure about, but still excited, I think, as Jeff mentioned, I think we're on actually the same page with this one. Is I don't know exactly how esports ties into it, but I don't think it's a bad idea. I would imagine that a lot of people who participate in X Games are also gamers. Again, like it just kind of falls into sort of the same category of like counterculture youth stuff to me. So I don't know exactly how they're planning that tie-in, and I would be interested to see, but I think it's a good idea to do that.
Christian says, I'm very surprised it took the X Games this long to have this idea. I mean, it took new ownership, so that usually helped. Christopher says, welcome, Christopher, by the way. Tony Hawk would probably say, why not? I mean, Tony Hawk made so much money off his video game. I agree. He would probably say, why not? Christopher also says, we have so many Chris's, Christophers, Christians, by the way. We're the #1 show for Chris's globally. Christopher says, I know plenty of skateboarders and BMXers that like competitive gaming. You know, this is the perfect, like, you're right, Jeff. It's the perfect YouGov study, like, to figure out what is the crossover, because I just don't know. Is it stronger than like more traditional sports because it's more counterculture, to Lindsay's point? I don't know. We can all, speculate, but the data I think would tell the story. David says, Tony Hawk took too much of my time in college. Definitely crossover to the greater esports space. Well, there you go. I mean, there's at least a few data points here that there's a lot of crossover between these two. Christian says, I agree with Lindsay. The bro culture of X Games and the sponsors of the X Games make this a match made in heaven. You know, that's an interesting
I never
angle.
agree with Lindsay. I just would have said it first.
But no, the sponsor's an interesting angle, right? Because you got to think gaming has all the energy drinks.
Yeah, this is like the energy drink event in the real world, so makes sense.
The jerseys look the same too. You know, they're all drinking Monster, wearing these similar looking jerseys, kind of spectating. I see the appeal. At a glance, they're the same.
You know, I was not sure of this, but now that I think about the sponsor angle, now this makes total sense because it's the same group of sponsors. Christopher says, I'm sure there's plenty of reasons to keep X Games separate from competitive gaming / esports, because not all X Games fans like video games at all. You could advocate either way. After 50 years, it will probably look a lot different. You know, that's also a very interesting take. Do they turn off any existing X Games fans if all of a sudden it's two guys on a PC playing like League of Legends? I'm exaggerating to make a point.
They actually
Someone jump out of a plane.
I mean, I think people just cannot watch those segments. I assume a lot of this will be done with like shoulder content around the games. I don't think it's going to be like a medal event within the games is going to be, an esports tournament. Maybe it is, maybe it isn't. But I think it will maybe just be stuff around like tangentially. So I think they could do it very easily without alienating, the core.
I mean, but wasn't there, I think it was on one of the ESPNs, right? Where they aired Overwatch League and they had all the, the traditional sports fans who were there for the football game or whatever going like, what is this? Why are you playing this on, ABC or whatever it was? Like you're going to get some blowback. Will they lose fans? Probably not. But David says,
the difference,
sorry,
Paul, if I could, I mean,
yeah.
And maybe you're probably right. I'm sure you will get some blowback, but at least in this case, they're playing the game that you would normally see in the X Games. Like I think when Madden is on TV on ESPN, I don't think people might turn it on and be like, "Oh, this is stupid." You're still going to get like the Gen X, whatever, like the boomers who are just like completely against gaming. But at least people would be like, "Okay, there's a Madden tournament on ESPN. I get it." Versus Overwatch, like people would just like, "What is this? Like this literally isn't a sport." Or at least that's what they're saying, I think.
Yeah, and David, I think, backs that up. It says, I assume they're going to play X Games video games. Like it's going to be Tony Hawk and other things. That would be the most logical. Christian says, X Games are now called the Caffeine Olympics. Yeah. I mean, I like the branding. I think it makes sense. All right, guys, let's talk about, I have another group of stories here. This is actually a study from YouGov that they did. By the way, David says agree with the juice. a study that YouGov did with Saudi Arabia, and I saw a couple of articles on it, so I figured it was worth at least mentioning because YouGov very generously sponsors this live stream. And the first headline here was esports growth and venue development in KSA. New survey shows passion for esports in Saudi Arabia driving demand for purpose-built venues. So I'm going to dig into just a couple of the stats here, but and there's a whole report here you can download. So I'll link this in the chat for you guys to go check it out because it's a YouGov report. Basically, they partnered with YouGov for this. But then I saw another coverage of the same report, which said Saudi gaming market set to grow more than threefold as interest in esports rises. What the growth? So they're forecasting threefold growth by 2030. The 250% growth over the next 8 years would mean that its contribution to Saudi Arabia's gross domestic product will have surged 50 times by 2030 compared with 2022. Obviously, there's stats here on the general market, but gaming consumption in Saudi Arabia is projected to hit 6.8 billion by 2030 and growing at 22% a year through 2030. And the esports segment is going to generate a considerable amount also in the kingdom. Now, this is all based on what the kingdom's planning with their strategy document, which I've consistently flattered that they took so many of my ideas. But interesting YouGov report. I'm curious if you guys honed in on any of these things. Like for example, this one that showed in Saudi, more than 3/4 of gamers say they're interested in esports, 78%. So it's not just casual gamers, it's people who are genuinely interested in competitive gaming. Any thoughts on this, guys, or any comments?
I think that we should start a segment called Paul Brags About Why He Moved to the Middle East once again.
Hey, this is a report from YouGov.
Have that week over week, just so that you can get it out of your system.
I hate to be right all the time. I mean, I don't know what to tell you.
I'm sure. No, I mean, I do think that this is important, and there's been lots of movement in the Middle East for a lot of reasons, but one of them is that oil is not going to be sustainable forever, and I think technology makes a lot more sense. And obviously, the resources that they're putting forth towards technology, it's like basically unmatched. So glad that there is actually an audience and a fan base and growth coming out of that, rather than it just being empty dollars.
Yeah, the other thing they found, Lindsay, was 86% of people surveyed who had participated in an esports event said the venue had a direct impact on how they experienced it, which is interesting because I think venues have gone a little bit out of fashion in the rest of the world, but seems very important there, or more important there in terms of the engagement with esports, which I thought was interesting. And that 81% of the people surveyed felt esports events should happen in Saudi Arabia. Like they want more local esports events, which I think is a very high percentage of gamers. Keep in mind, they talked to 1,000, male and female residents, people who identified as gamers. So, Jimmy, Jeff, any thoughts on this before we move on? I thought it was interesting, and again, it's you guys.
I think that 78 number's pretty impressive, as you noted. I would be curious. I don't know if we have it for the U.S. or rest of the world. It does seem a lot higher. I would think it, just anecdotally, I would think it would be less than 50%, maybe here in the U.S. But I think that's very important and speaks to why it makes sense to build these venues. So it's a good piece of content.
Yeah, David says, in the U.S., we so often talk about the government using funds by picking winners, so we would be unlikely to invest billions of dollars. Are they creating the market there with investment, or they're all? I'm not sure what that last word was.
I think I understand what David's saying. He's basically saying, is this the chicken or the egg? It's kind of like the chicken or the egg. Like, is the market growing so fast because the government is investing in it, or is the government kind of seeing a trend and getting behind it? I actually would be curious. This almost gets into a political question, but I'd be curious, Paul, to hear your take.
I mean, it's a different. So two things. It's a different market. I've always said in the U.S. That more hyper local kind of arenas, more neighborhood, smaller venues, and many more of them is what the market is sort of set up for and what the market needs. In a place like Saudi Arabia, when you have big government backing, you can build huge venues, and it becomes economically feasible that in a way that you just can't in the US without government backing. So like what is possible definitely changes with dollars, but it also is probably a better fit for the culture, the environment there, right? Like we're talking about a place where the first movie theater popped up just a year or two ago, right? Like that didn't have a movie theater before this. So the kinds of things you can do and that resonate there will be different inevitably. In terms of what comes first, the interest or the dollars, I sort of don't think it matters, right? Like who cares if it's a population interested in gaming and the government puts fuel on the fire, or the government starts the fire and the people there put fuel on it. The end result is what it is right now, and I think it's a great example of government fostering what is clearly a growth industry, right? Whether people there all want to be gamers or not, when you put this kind of money, you're going to get interest. You're going to get people excited about it. So, I mean, Christopher says dollar bill, y'all. Yeah, I mean they're definitely putting a lot of money behind this. So yeah, that's. I just wanted to spend a couple of minutes on that, guys, because again, from our partners at YouGov, I always find it fascinating the research that they produce. All right, let's talk about Nike, and this one this one I don't understand. Lindsay, Jeff, Jimmy, you guys are going to have to explain this one to me. So Nike in the news, and the headline here is Nike taps its first esports player, China's League of Legends pro Uzi. Now, the article goes on to explain that about a week ago, Nike created some buzz online because they signed this Chinese League of Legends player, professionally known as Uzi. It's the first time, according to this, I don't think I had seen any others, that the brand has signed a deal with a specific esports athlete. The announcement video racked up 2 million views on Weibo within just one day. But Uzi, according to the article, retired in 2020 due to chronic health issues. He's one of the most successful League of Legends players, no question, but he hasn't played professionally since 2020 because of an injury. I'm just trying to think. The part that was funny for me here was Nike can sign any esports athlete on the planet, right? Literally, it's Nike. They're the biggest sporting brand in the world. They could go after anyone, sign anyone. Did it strike you as odd that they would pick someone who's no longer competing and also no longer competing due to injury? Like, it'd be like signing the football player that got injured 2 years ago and doesn't play anymore as like the first football player to ever sign to your brand. Does that not seem weird as a choice?
I mean, you're talking about the brand that made Colin Kaepernick the face of its campaign 3 years after he left the National Football League. So no, I don't think so. I think Nike goes after stories much more than it goes after the stories in sports, and they've been very consistent about that, about telling stories with sports. And now I think they're doing the same thing for an Asian audience.
But what's his story? So
I don't necessarily
I totally
know.
don't think it's crazy that they signed someone who's not playing. I mean, it's a little surprising, but I think sports have gotten to a place in our culture, particularly, with social media, esports, brand influencing, like you don't have to necessarily be playing on the field on Sunday or Saturday to have a presence still. Like there are plenty of US athletes I know that are retired that still have massive presence, are constantly in the news, constantly, on TV. So I don't think that necessarily includes him. I would be interested, I don't follow him, so it'd be interesting to know like how active he is. Is he still streaming but just not competing professionally? Like there are things I would like, is he commentating? Like there's a lot of questions I would have, but I would assume that Nike didn't do this without a plan, I guess is my point.
It's interesting because both of you aren't phased by this, right? That that this is in line with sort of Nike's behavior previously. But there's still the business question of, is that the best move? If you're the director of partnerships or marketing at Nike, you're the CMO at Nike, is this the first person you sign in esports? Wouldn't you want maybe someone a bit more globally recognized, or I don't know?
I just don't doubt Nike's brand strategy. They've done this. They've done a million different story campaigns that have been wildly successful. And whatever internal metrics they're using to measure the audience that they're going after, I strongly believe that they chose the best person for that.
Chris says, funny part is the injury, actually. Chris, what was the injury? I don't actually know. Now I'm curious. David says, Bo knows esports. Bo knows esports. Nike does, or at least thinks they do. Antonio says, Nike still has their shoes made in China, huh? Ha ha ha. Business and politics, politics and business. I'm starting to not see a difference. I don't know. Do they? I think they still make their shoes in China.
Yeah, I thought about that too.
I don't buy Nike shoes, so I don't know. But it doesn't mean their market's China, right? Like where it's manufactured, or does this buy them like brownie points with the Communist Party? Maybe that's it, right? So they can continue manufacturing there at low cost. I'm not sure, but I wanted to bring up another story related to this because I do think I will say my hot take is that signing was a mistake, because I don't think this is the right guy to be Nike's first signing. I think it just doesn't make sense for a lot of reasons. And let me make the case here, because there was another article I saw this week about China, and the headline here says China's video games market declines as 39 million youth gamers have stopped playing. Government restrictions have taken a toll on the country's huge games market. So the article, basically, it's summarized there, that decline of 2.5% year on year in terms of revenue, and that they haven't authorized any new games. They haven't allowed any new games to be released in the country, basically. And as a consequence, there's a huge decline, both obviously in revenue, but in the player base. So according to this, China will have 700 million gamers across all platforms by end of 2022, marking the second year of decline, and that 39 million have stopped playing. Now, 700 million, 701.8 million, still a very big number, but the gaming regulations that they introduced, that we talked about at length on this show, are the reason behind the decline, according to this person who was interviewed in the article. So does this convince anyone that signing a Chinese esports pro was maybe not the best idea, or you stand by it, Jimmy?
It's hard, Paul. We've spoken at length not just about all the crackdowns that were happening, but just on how volatile that region is in general, right? So anytime you do any kind of business over there, it's subject to the whims of the government and the political climate on what they're going to allow or not allow. Like you said, it's still a very big number. I'm curious, just because there are fewer games or fewer gamers, does that mean that these people are going to turn to watching gaming as opposed to playing gaming? Or is this kind of a decline overall? How much of that is truly captured? Are there limitations on what they can watch versus play? So I still have just a lot of questions. Without teasing too much, I know we have a company coming on the show this month called East Coast Global, which specializes in taking Western companies to that region. And I'm looking forward to asking some of these questions to those guys as experts in that region. And shout out to them. We'll be recording that episode shortly, and hopefully we'll have some further clarity on it. But if I'm Nike, to Lindsay's point, they're not doing anything without all the research and understanding what their objectives are, what audience they want to target, and what they think and how they think it'll perform. I just think that it's hard to make long-term decisions or have certainty in that particular region in the world because of how often their policies are changing, that we've seen, at least in esports. So, I think there's a huge market there. These are still very large numbers. yeah, the decline is not promising. But, you know, as we saw with the Xbox stories earlier, you can have some pretty bad press out there and still be doing pretty well overall.
Yeah, I just don't think any Western companies should be going east. Like, maybe that's a hot take. I just don't think the opportunity is what people think it is there. There's a real crackdown. There's tons of regulatory risk. You're in an environment that's not business friendly. Like, I just don't see why any Western company would even consider it. There's just so many reasons against it. And frankly, I don't buy any of their numbers. Definitely the good numbers I don't buy, and I don't buy the bad numbers either, right? Like, my guess is the decline in youth gamers is probably 5 to 10 times bigger than what they're saying, and their 700 million numbers probably half or a third in reality of the number they're publishing. Like, I just think they're probably lying on both ends, or at least bending the truth. And I just don't trust those numbers. It's hard to trust them because there's so little transparency around them. Jeff, you were going to say something?
I was just going to say, I totally agree. You can't trust them. I could even paint a scenario where the declines are not as bad as they're making it sound, but all the reporting, they want the government's actions to look like it works. So, okay, the government wants gaming to slow down and wants people to stop gaming. Oh, look here, guess what happened? Like, the data shows that that's what's happening. So, to your point, you can't trust them either way. So that it's risky. But it is one of the biggest regions still in the world, so you can't ignore it. That's the problem.
I'm not saying ignore it. I agree there's opportunity there. It's just, if you're not a business operating there, like going and investing dollars to go and operate there today in the current environment is hard to recommend. Like, I wouldn't be the advice I would give to anybody. Could it be the biggest region in the world if they actually wanted to? Yeah, no question, right? It's a question of population size, really. Let me just get caught up here. Christian says this is the only way that North America will beat a Chinese league team at Worlds. Poor NA. David says, wasn't the government intervention only regarding kids? Maybe they're opening a market to adults that would know the older player. I mean, it was definitely targeted at kids, but those, like, this is the majority of gamers. And not only that, like, those gamers, if you stop them from gaming when they're 13 or 14, it's not something they'll just pick up, I don't think, when they're 30. I just don't think that's the behavior. Like, to me, part of it is making gamers for life, and, you know, they're playing when they're kids and become adult gamers. Christian says kids are shifting from traditional sports to esports and gaming. Regulations on gaming doesn't bode well for the country as a whole. No, I mean, the numbers, even if you believe them, 39 million fewer gamers is a lot. I mean, that's more fewer gamers than the entire population of Saudi Arabia. So it's like, it's a big number, the decline. All right, guys, I just wanted to say before we continue, we've got a couple more good stories here, but before we continue, this live stream, very generously sponsored by YouGov. YouGov produces the absolute best data on gamers, games, esports fans all around the world. If you're looking to go after that gaming audience, you absolutely need to partner with YouGov. Don't go alone. You want their data to be able to make good decisions, and the data is all actionable. It's living data. It's constantly updated. So highly recommend partnering with them. I'm going to put in the chat a link you guys can go to, yougov.com/BOE. There's some free reports there. I also linked that Saudi report earlier, which you guys should go check out, but yougov.com/BOE. And if you want to be put in touch with anyone at YouGov, you can ask any of us. We're all happy to connect you with the fine folks at YouGov. All right. We talked about esports, obviously, on this show. But there was one this week that I actually watched. I don't always watch esports. And Christian, it's not CSGO, unfortunately. TI was this past weekend, TI 11. And I thought it was interesting because I had strong feelings on how I thought the tournament and production went. And then I saw a couple of articles, and I felt like it's worth discussing here. And so the first one is, Tundra Esports wins the International 11 Dota 2 tournament. So it's a kind of a generic article that they win a first place prize of about $8.5 million. They beat Team Secret in the finals. And it's a very nice story. And then I saw this one from Esports, which says TI11 slumps to 3-year low for Dota 2 viewership, but there's a bright silver lining. And according to them, it got 67 million hours watched. It peaked at 1.7 million concurrent viewers. So this is the lowest viewership it's ever had in the last 3 years. TI10 and TI9 performed better, but those had bigger prize pools, right? This is the lowest prize pool since TI5, and it's because Valve changed the way they did pricing for this, which I think I'll explain in a second. There's a whole interesting discussion in and of itself. But according to this article, the one silver lining was TI11 had more hours watched and a higher peak viewership number, except for TI9 and TI10. So it wasn't like a failure, but it didn't live up to those two, if you want to call that a silver lining. Now, the way they changed the prize pool, because prize pools had been going up for this tournament year over year very consistently. What they did was usually they come out with a battle pass. The battle pass usually comes out, a couple months before the tournament, and 25% of all the revenue from the battle pass would go to TI's prize pool. This is how Valve has done it. This year, the way they did it was they put out the battle pass literally like 2 weeks before the tournament, and they called it phase 1 of the battle pass, and only 25% of phase 1 would go to the prize pool for TI11. But the battle pass would continue after TI, and in that case, all the revenue would go to Valve. Meaning if you bought the battle pass in the 2 weeks before when it came out, 25% of that was going to the tournament. If you buy the battle pass the day after the tournament, all of that revenue is going to Valve. So part of it, and the discussion I'd like to have with you guys, is the prize money has gone way down. Like, I think the total pool was 18 million or something like that, 16 million, compared to last year, which was almost 30 something million. Do you think we reached a point where esports prize money, it's big enough that it doesn't matter, right? And Valve probably said, well, we'll keep the 20 million extra dollars for us. Or do you think this is a big mistake on their part?
So I mean, it's hard to say because the anecdotal data says that the viewership went down as the prize pool went down. Thus, maybe I'm wrong. What I'm about to say is wrong, but I think you're absolutely right. Like, at a certain threshold, like, it just doesn't stand to reason that more people care if the prize pool is 47 million versus 31 million. Like, yes, maybe you could write that PR headline like, "This is the biggest esports tournament prize pool ever." But like, yeah. I don't know. Does that really drive incremental viewership? Maybe it drives a little bit of awareness. I don't know. I guess I keep flip-flopping my answer. But I think net, this is a good strategy for Valve, bottom line, to make more money. Like, I just don't see any reason why you need to continuously pay out such larger and larger prize pools. You're getting the players, the best players in the world want to play the game. They want to be part of this. If nothing else, I think what Valve should do, and I think this may be something we've talked about a lot in the past, is expand their competitive scene so that right now, I believe the only tournament in Dota that really gets a ton of prize pool and viewership is the TI. Why don't they take that massive TI purse and spread it out more so evenly so that more of the other tournaments become more important, get more viewership? So that's maybe what I would recommend, or what I would have liked to have seen them do with kind of the other 50% of the prize pool. But overarching, I have no issue with them giving less money. The players already, if you win that tournament, you're making a boatload of money. Like, I don't think the other 50% is like something they're owed. Like, I don't feel bad for them.
Lindsay, did you have thoughts on this?
I don't think it's weird to keep the battle pass open. I think it's weird to cut that window so much shorter. Like, I don't know. I think that this was a bit of a dramatic move in my eyes, and I think it's a bit of a bad faith move towards the community to make like such drastic changes 1 year. I think like you slide into that a little more, because to Jeff's point, I don't think it's bad that they make more money, but it's just, it seems like doing all of this in a year where people are now actually outside again, and you would expect viewership to drop anyway. It seems like a little bit of a bad faith move on their part. So I don't love like the optics of it, the actual mechanics of it. I take less of an issue with it. I just think it looks bad. And I do think that the viewership thing is not surprising at all because people are now going outside more and able to do more things. To Jeff's point, one thing that I want to make very clear is that correlation does not equal causation. So there's no statistical reason why the lower prize pool would, at this moment, someone can do an analysis, but why the lower prize pool would mean less viewership. And Paul, to your point, I do think that in some ways it seems like they could also just cap the prize pool and avoid all of these issues and say, we're going to sell Battle Pass until it makes the $35 million prize pool every single year. And that's the prize pool. And if it's less, that's on the community. I think that there are other ways to go about this than changing a bunch of things last minute. Or not last minute, but changing a bunch of things and then just like throwing it out there. But I don't necessarily think that they were wrong for wanting to change it, I guess.
Yeah, I think, Lindsay, your point on correlations, not causation, is really smart because David here brings up one of these points, which is like more likely 9 and 10 were during the lockdowns, had a more captive audience. Most people can't conceive of the difference between 40 and 20 million. With you, David, on the 40 and 20, right? Like whether the player won $4 million or they won $2 million, it's still a lot of money. And so I don't think the viewer cares. But there are hidden variables, right? Like 9 and 10 did happen during lockdown. That's a hidden variable in there. The other hidden variable is, frankly, because I watched it, this was the worst TI production maybe in TI history. I mean, my grandmother would have done a better job. Like the final match, the absolute final match, the stream crashed. And then then it came back on, and you were at the 15-minute mark in the match or something, and then all of a sudden it fast forwarded to the 25-minute mark. Like everyone just missed 10 minutes of the final, like the deciding final game. It was so poorly done. I mean, you couldn't understand anything the casters were saying, frankly, because they were all masked up. But none of the players were, so like I didn't understand the strategy there. It was a really poor production, and I think there's a hidden variable there. Now, did that have an impact on viewership? Maybe not. But Lindsay, to your point, right? It's hard to say because of the prize pool decrease. We're sure this is why viewership went down. It would be nice if we could say that because that's an interesting takeaway, right? That viewership and prize pools are directly connected in that way. But I suspect not, because of all these other variables at play. I suspect it's not so directly connected. All right, guys, I have one last story, and then we're done for this week. And this is a bit of a fun one. Our favorite, I guess, celebrity gamer, maybe, or at least my favorite celebrity gamer in the news this week, and it's Henry Cavill. And the headline here is The Witcher. I don't know why they needed to put this. The Witcher Superman actor Henry Cavill, like we could have just said Henry Cavill, will produce a video game in the future. So according to him, he was talking to Josh Horowitz in an interview, and he said this. I'll read this. He says he'll eventually produce a video game. The time will come, Henry Cavill said. It's something which I'm very excited about doing, something that's important to me. I want to be there from the beginning of things and guide the ship from the get-go. I thought this was interesting because we saw the doc, call it more celebrity than anything else, want to make his own video game because he had ideas and, felt like he could do better than what was out there. What do we think of Henry Cavill's chance at making a successful video game? As an actor, as a creative himself, as a gamer himself, is that enough to say, hey, we really think this is going to be successful?
No. I feel like he has to work a lot harder to make a good game. The doc is more, the doc is a gamer, so making a game is more of a natural fit. I think this is gonna be like when Michael Jordan went to play baseball. It's like, this isn't really your lane. You're gonna have to work a lot harder to make it good for people, and there's gonna be a lot more scrutiny.
But he
No,
is a gamer.
I so
He was a
disagree with
gamer.
this. He missed the call for Superman because he was playing WoW, guys, and he's built his own PC. I mean, you take there was another story out this week about him not returning for season 4 of The Witcher, and the rumor is that there's a disagreement with the writers because the writers didn't like the books or the game and wanted to go in their own direction. Again, just an unfounded rumor. Other rumors that it's because of his commitment to Superman. But I think Henry Cavill is a huge gamer, right? This is a guy that plays not just Call of Duty, which I think is, it is what it is, or not just FIFA, right? Those are kind of the games that you associate with people that maybe have a foot in each camp. He's playing WoW. This guy is all in. He is as hardcore, I think, as they come. So I agree with you that it's more than just being a gamer or more than just having an interest, right? There's a lot at work here. But I think as far as passion goes, connections go, if he wants to make something, I think he can make it happen. Whether or not it's going to be good or successful, yeah, absolutely. But
Wait, sorry, I feel like I got misinterpreted, Jimmy, because I meant I think he has the skills to do it. I meant on the public side, there's going to be a lot different scrutiny. Like people are going to be looking at it a lot differently because he is known as an actor. I firmly am in your camp with he
there we
has
go.
the
Sorry,
passion for it and can do it. It's just the scrutiny is going to be a lot different than the Doc's game because the Doc is known as a gamer.
I genuinely think he's going to make a good game because I've been to so many crypto conferences over the last few weeks. I've heard game pitches, play to earn games, blockchain games pitched from people who have never played a game in their life, right? Literally, it's all crypto people who are like, we're making a game. It's going to have tokens. Right? And I'm like, for once, this is a person who's genuinely passionate about gaming, like genuinely, because, and he gains nothing really from being a passionate gamer publicly. If anything, I think Henry Cavill has done more for the gaming industry than anyone since Ninja. Like, I'll go out on a limb and I'll say that, in the sense that he broke all the stereotypes. This is not the nerdy, overweight guy sitting in his basement. This is Superman playing video games, right? Like, and loving it and building his own PC and doing all these so-called nerdy things. I really think this man is breaking down barriers and breaking stereotypes more than people give him credit for. And I genuinely think he's got a better chance than almost anyone right now at making it a good game because he loves games himself. Anyone who loves WoW this much, I think has a chance of making a good game. Let's put it that way. David says those games specifically are about the stories. David, I'm not sure what you meant.
Maybe he's alluding to, a good game is going to need a good story, right? And that's something that Henry Cavill cares about.
True.
Which is why we're all supportive of him doing right in this endeavor, is that he's going to make a good story. I think that's where David's going here. And I'm going to credit you for that, David. I totally agree.
And understands character development and all these good things as an actor. Guys, that brings us to the end of this show. It flies by every week. I just want to say thank you to everyone who participated, who showed up live. I also want to thank everyone who's going to be listening to this not live after the fact. We appreciate you guys too. Thank you to Jimmy. Thank you to Lindsay. Thank you, Jeff. As always, you guys are amazing. Could not do this without all of you. And just some reminders, guys, tune into the podcast this week with Sean Pate from Zenny. It's a great episode. It's different from the episodes we usually do because it's a non-endemic brand. So it's a bit of a different conversation. Also subscribe to Business of Esports everywhere, on Instagram, on TikTok, on LinkedIn, on YouTube, you name it, on every single platform. We put out content. You should be on all of them. Make sure you subscribe to us on all of them. Keep an eye out, especially on TikTok. We're going to try and do more live content there. That's coming. So make sure you're subscribed there if you're not already. And as always, guys, don't forget the most important thing of all, the future is fun. We'll see you next week.